me, the audio is cutting in and out and kind of staticky from what I hear. So I don't know.
On my end?
Yeah. Because I can hear everybody else, so I thought it was me, but I can hear everybody else just fine.
Emily, you look beautiful today.
Oh, thanks.
Like you could take over the world today. You look great.
Thank you. I'm helping out at a viewing tonight, so I'm all glamour. I don't feel glamorous. Like I'm still recovering from my concussion, and the doctor confirmed my nose got broken. So so I'm like here, but I'm kind of like hazy. So forgive me if I'm like out of it.
Oh, that's quite all right. I'm sorry that you're still feeling those effects.
Yeah, it's not fun. So
have your classes been okay with all of that happening?
Our professor is super supportive, and I have another professor, Openshaw. She's been real great. And they've just been really supportive. I've been trying to like maintain deadlines, but honestly, it's like, it's hard to concentrate for long extended periods of time. And I get like massive headaches, and like my whole head gets all warm, and I don't know. Like right now, I kind of like, I'm still in the beginning stages of like being out of it. So.
I've had actually 2 friends now that have had concussions, and it's taken a couple of months for them to really get past some of the effects that they've had come from it.
Oh yeah. The doctor's like, it could take a couple weeks or longer. So I'm like, that doesn't help. Like in the middle of like the semester, I'm like this is just bad timing.
Oh gosh.
But I'm just trying to keep going, and so, but I appreciate your understanding and support. It's been
absolutely
a difficult process for me.
Okay, did that help at all, or is it still choppy?
It helped a little. Yeah, but it's choppy.
We'll try it this way. What about now?
Much better.
Yeah.
Still a little bit of static on my end, but not as bad as it was just a moment ago.
Okay. That's really weird. Of course, I'm downstairs instead of being upstairs like I usually am. I don't know if that matters.
Maybe the connection, I don't know.
But you can hear me okay, though?
Yes. You're good.
Okay. Okay.
Can you hear us well, Liza? Okay, good.
Well, I have a question. I don't think I really understand null hypothesis. And when I'm trying to do the homework as well, and it talks more about null hypothesis now than our reading did. But logically, to me, I don't understand it. So the way I see it, like, to me, it says like there's like a 5% chance that the null hypothesis would be correct or not correct, something like that. But in my head, I'm like, well, the null hypothesis, wouldn't there be such a small percentage or like chance that it would be like correct? Or do you know what I mean?
That has a lot to do with statistics. Like in our statistics class, it was like, if it was greater than or less than that 0.05, whatever it was, the 0.05, then if it's low, so if it's below that, then you reject the null. And then if it's above that, then you don't reject it. So I guess you're confused probably because you haven't recently had a statistics class. And so it doesn't make sense that why would it only be 5%? I don't know. I've never asked why the 0.05. I'm like, okay. That's what they said it's supposed to be. Okay.
Well, so, and it can change, and it can change. It's the 5% is kind of the general, and the 5% gives you that 95% confidence interval that most are looking for. But that can change. Sometimes they'll use, what was the other one? Is it 7% and 3%? I can't remember. The more you close that, the bigger the smaller your confidence level is. So most people are comfortable with that 0.05. But I believe that in later chapters they do talk about it. So we do talk about descriptive statistics. So we'll go over it even more, but it's towards the end of the semester that we'll go through it.
So the null hypothesis, just the definition, it means that there's no difference between means among the variables being investigated. So like in chapter 6, I don't know if you've done the homework yet for this week, but they're testing like which cognitive behavioral therapy or like psychoanalytic therapy, which one is more effective. And to me, logically, I would think like there would be different means for them being successful. But this is saying like the null hypothesis, which means that there's no difference between the means, is more likely. And I'm like, what? I don't understand that. Logically, I don't understand.
The null is an interesting concept, because it's kind of an assumption that's being made, and you're deciding. You can't ever prove that it's true. You can't ever say that it's true. You can reject it, but you're never proving that it's true. So I think that's kind of a really strange thing that comes into play with it. So you're only deciding whether or not you're going to reject it or not reject it. And by not rejecting it, you're not then saying, oh, it's true. That's not what you're saying. You're just saying that you can't reject it. That means then that your alternative hypothesis is more likely to be true, if that makes sense.
Okay.
It's weird. I know. It's weird. It's really weird.
Yeah.
Really weird.
But Tammy's right. When you take your statistics class, it will start to make a lot more sense. And so usually, when you're doing your statistics class, you're trying to test that level of significance first, with the null hypothesis. And if you reject the null, then it's more likely that your hypothesis is true. But then you can't really even prove that the hypothesis is true without further testing. Does that make? I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So most likely you reject the null hypothesis.
You're hoping to reject it.
Yeah, but it doesn't always happen that way. It's not. Yeah.
If you fail to reject the null, then it's more likely that whatever you're testing for is not going to be true. Or I don't want to even say true. Got to take that out of my language. More likely that it's not valid, or you're kind of going down a wrong avenue. So you want to make sure that you reject the null first, and then you can see whether or not your hypothesis can be true. I keep saying true. Dang it.
Well, that's what it says in the book. So you're right. It says, if test T produces results that seem fairly likely if the null hypothesis is true, which are results that occur greater than 5% of the time, then the null hypothesis is not rejected. That's so confusing to me.
I know, because I remember in statistics class that, just going over many times that you should never say that it's true. That you can only say that you fail to reject it or you reject it. But then I think I'm reading in some of the same places where you are, and it's saying true. Like the T, like you said, T under the assumption that the null hypothesis is true. And if the null hypothesis is true, the sample statistic will only fall into the tails of, like, it goes over and it just keeps bringing that up. And I'm like, oh, I remember.
It's like saying the word prove. Like
There you go.
one of my teachers now says, don't ever say prove. Like this study proves. It doesn't prove, it just shows. So
Yeah.
it's like, kind of like prove and truth goes hand in hand. So it doesn't prove anything. It just shows what it could be, or this is a possibility, or this is what it shows. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's where Ruth is coming from.
I think if you go into the chapter, I believe chapter 15, it goes over more of the null hypothesis and what it means.
So have any of you done the chapter 6 homework yet?
That's next week.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, this week is chapter 5.
Are you talking about SPSS? Because I think SPSS weren't doing chapter 6.
Oh yeah, SPSS
Yeah,
is 6
chapter
and
6
7
and
this
7.
week. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
I haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
I haven't
I
touched it yet.
I haven't done it either.
Now, the great thing, Catherine, is that by going through this class first, when you get into your statistics class, totally will get it.
She doesn't have to take it.
Well, yeah, the sad thing is I took statistics like years ago. So it transferred because I went to a community college and took it. And so I could go into this class because I already took it, but I don't remember anything.
It's all good. That's awesome, though.
Well,
I think we all need to do the homework and then talk about it again.
Did you have questions on it, Catherine, on the chapter 6?
yeah, it was mostly about the null hypothesis, like really understanding what that meant in the homework. Like, I guess it would be easy to just go through it and go through the motions, but I want to understand, like, why?
Give me a call back on myself, 201-655-5481.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think in science and also in math, why doesn't ever get answered.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, we can talk about the other chapter we read for this week.
Well, let's see. Did you guys like the reading this week on the variables and sampling?
I liked it because it reminded me of the stuff I learned in the statistics class.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, oh, this is familiar. That's good. I don't have to think as hard.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot about statistics. And maybe that's why you're struggling, Catherine, a little bit to do the SPSS and the assignments.
Well, the previous assignments have been fine, but now it's getting more
Yeah.
more statisticky.
You know what I did, Catherine, especially like going through my statistics class, is I did a lot of of terms that I was still not familiar with, because you know the textbooks and everything, they do it on a very complex, descriptive way that is confusing sometimes, and I just sometimes just put in a term in Google search and description or define. And I also would do a lot of YouTube videos of like people just talking about it and putting it on very basic like terms, and that helped me a lot throughout the statistics class. So
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, because I think that
Somebody's-
I felt limited with just textbooks, and I was like, I need something more. And I'm kind of a visual person, so if I can see it, I understand it better. But hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think it will.
You know, it's interesting. I just did that. I just typed in null hypothesis and found something on study.com that has like a video that goes through it. So
Okay, sweet.
that's awesome, Emily.
Thanks.
You know, the part that I thought was really interesting at the reading is all the information about reliability and validity. Like there's several different ways that you can test for reliability, and then several different ways to get validity as well. I
Yeah,
thought those were interesting.
I agree. I actually didn't know about those terms till, this reading. So in regards to statistics and stuff.
You know, there's something else that I did, and I haven't turned this in yet, so I haven't been able to get a response for them. But I've noticed from the ones that I turned in the past, I think I got so sick of trying to figure out new ways to describe terminology that they have in the book that I just started using. I turned in with this section a resources page. So if I found something like a definition, I typed it in exactly the way it was, and then I just made sure that I cited it and put it into citations because I was getting so sick of it at that point. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to cite it all. And I turned in the resources page with it. And I do remember that, I mean, at least my other professor accepted it. So I'm hoping he accepts it. But maybe that's a way to get around this idea of trying to reword everything.
Well, the thing of it is it's hard when you're doing an outline of something that you read and you need to know words and definitions and concepts, because you need to all know the same definition to a certain word or the same concept to a situation. And so I just think sorry, but I think it's dumb to try and think that not everyone is going to match, because it's obvious that we're going to match. And so the first one I turned in, it was like a 50% match, and I thought, oh, that's not too bad. The second one I turned in was 70, and I thought, oh no, that one's going to be crap, And I'm like, what can I do? And I actually had a friend, I don't know if it's the girl that's in my class, she said that, or in another class, she said that she related her outline to her study question, her research question. And so she would make comments about her research question after each one. But I did that with the second one, and I still got 70%. But he graded both of them, and I got an A on both. So I don't know if he really looks at that percentage as much as we think. I think he wants to make sure we're doing outlines and really getting the concepts. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think I remember him saying something about how the outlines are really meant for us, which I really appreciated in comparison with the last teacher I took. Like, she really stressed, the plagiarism and making sure that we were under a certain percentage, and that was really stressful. That was really stressful. And I have to, I mean, I haven't changed anything from my outlines from what I turned in the past. I told him that I was going to turn them in, so he was prepared for it. But I mean, all of mine show up as, like 98%. And it's the only thing I'm changing is, really his name for the last professor's name, and I'm getting full credit for him. Okay. So I think that's pretty much it for him. I think it's all a matter of making sure that we do the outlines for ourselves. I think it really, really helpful for the tests, and helpful for us to understand what's being said. And I have to say, when I took the test, to have these out in front of me, most of the answers I could find in my outlines. I didn't have to shift to the book as much as I needed to the first time I did it.
And did you guys see, Brother Boring's note on outlines that he
Yeah.
posted
Say
in the
something.
announcements.
Yeah.
So he even suggested to put the page numbers of, certain things inside your outline so that you could.
Yeah, he posted that right after I turned in my third one. I wish I would have known that before. But yeah, that's smart to do that, I think.
So yeah, it was great because I just went back for this week's stuff and I put in the page numbers for the main Roman numerals on the outline, since they go kind of page by page.
That's really smart. I think that would, because that's, when you're taking a test, that's usually what happens. You read something, you're like, oh, where is that? And so you're spending time trying to flip through the pages to find that concept. But if you have it right on your outline, you could just, oh, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually really helpful because I actually did that. And like when I got stuck on some of them, I was like, and it's timed exam. So I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
And so I got to look back and it was faster. But when I got to chapter 4, I had not done it. So I didn't have an outline. So that's okay. I'm going to know for next time.
Well, this is good to know, especially since this is, chapter 5, kind of starting out new with the with this for the next test. So I think I'm going to go back and do that.
You know what I found interesting in the reading is when it was describing like the different measurements that are used and how they operationally define the different constructs and like the different factors and also the scales of measurement. I found it all kind of fascinating how much goes into research and how careful they are or how careful they need to be in order to provide accurate data and measurement and to ensure that there's no flawed data. I thought that was really good.
Yeah. Who knew that there were so many different ways to measure things?
Right.
Seriously. Especially quantitative data because, you're describing a type of something. And so it's like, it's not numbers. It's like, how do you really measure that? So. But Catherine, I was going to tell you that SPSS, it becomes easier as you do it. And it's so much faster than doing things by hand. We weren't required, like in my class, to do that because our statistics class was just research based. And so it's like, all we had to do was use SPSS to do all the formulas. And they had like these awesome Excel sheets that would calculate things for us. And it became my best friend.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I do like the program because when I took it, all we had was a calculator, like as one of those really smart calculators, and a book. And so we did have to do everything by hand. I just forget.
That's incredible. No. I think it's amazing that you did it all by hand.
But yeah, it is really useful. It's kind of cool.
So this chapter, I felt like it was a lot, like you said, Emily, that it went a lot with our statistics class.
Yeah.
It was almost like a refresher. Talking and like sampling and the different types of how to do the tests and in anyway, like the random sampling and stratified and clustered. It's like, it just seems like everything started coming back to me from taking statistics over the summer. So it's kind of cool to be familiarized with that already and then to read up on it a little bit. One thing that I don't ever remember learning about, though, as far as sampling goes in our statistics class was the non-random sampling techniques. I mean, we talked a little bit about the convenient sampling and how not to do it, but it was like short. But like the
quota sampling,
and the purposive sampling and the snowball sampling, we never touched on that.
Yeah,
in
my My class didn't either.
So it was interesting to see that there were even more ways of doing tests and research.
Yeah, it was. They also had like that proportional stratified sampling and the proportional stratified sampling, and then the cluster sampling was broken up into two stages. So you can have one stage clustering and two stage clustering. It was really interesting.
Yeah. I guess it goes into more complex ideas about them, huh?
Yeah.
It does start to make you think about your proposal, though, and what type of sampling you would use. I mean, there's some of the things that we would be doing where I can see where some of like the quota sampling or the snowball sampling. I mean, if you're looking for opinions, like people's opinions and people willing to that have like similar, like the snowballing, I was thinking of people that you find someone that has cancer or that is struggling with it. You really do have to narrow down your population, and so sometimes you can ask someone if you know anybody else, if you've been in a cancer support group, or you have met someone through your doctor's office or somebody else that might be interested in helping us with this research. I can understand why snowballing sampling would be needed, because you're not going to find those types of samples with stratified random sampling, or even just regular or just random sampling, because you're not going to find those people that are as interested in the research or willing to participate.
Right.
Yeah, or the convenient sampling. I remember just like in high school or other classes, that's the only sampling I would pretty much do, convenient sampling, because I would ask people that I would know like on campus or whatever. So it's like, even though I probably said it was random sampling because I was just asking random people, it was actually really non-random sampling. It was convenient. So.
It's so interesting.
Did you guys relate anything, like as you were reading, did you think of anything? Because I was looking on what to write on the summary, and it said, how did this relate to the gospel? And I'm like, how do you relate that to the gospel? But in all honesty, I mean, when we're talking about reliability and validity, it's like if you turn that inwardly as like a character trait, being reliable or being validated, I don't know. I think that when I was reading about both of those in this chapter, I turned it into that instead of research, and then I understood it better. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, they just want to know how reliable it is, or they want to validate the findings. They want to kind of like how a person needs validation. I don't know. I kind of turned it more into that as I was reading.
I think that's a good idea. I think that's great.
I had it, but mine was more about kind of, I don't know if I want to say non-believers or just like questioners, how in the church we need both the reliability and the validity. And sometimes we hear things like in the early days of the church that may or may not have been true, but we see like a series of these statements that pretty much have a bad reputation on the church. Let's just say that. And so then people think, wow, like that church isn't true. It isn't good. But then we also have to look at the reliability in those facts. And if it doesn't have both, then it's not really valid, and doesn't really work. So that's kind of complicated, but I thought about that.
That's
I was
cool.
thinking about some of the stuff like the test retest reliability. reminded me a lot of the word of wisdom, where, you know, when the word wisdom was given, there are certain parts of the word of wisdom where people thought it was just, you know, it's just crazy. You know, smoking at that point or tobacco at that point wasn't seen for the vices that we know it has now. I mean, even drinking to some extent was just like, you know, not really seen as necessarily bad. I know that there's so many people now, like my kids are, you know, that were not there in Utah when we were out in New Jersey, where, you know, the kids would be like, "Oh, come to my house, you know, we're gonna have snacks and iced tea," and my kids would be like, "We can't have tea," you know, and they would always ask them, "Well, why? What's wrong with tea, or what's wrong with coffee?" And my kids would always come back and like, "What is wrong with it?" And I'd always have to go back to them and say, "Well, listen, we do know that, you know, when the word of wisdom was given, we didn't know why they said that smoking was bad. In fact, it was thought that it was okay, that it could clean your lungs out. There are all different things, but we know now that it's bad. We see all the problems that we're having with it. So we don't know why, per se. There's a lot of speculation of why we're not supposed to have coffee. Some say that it's, you know, I can't remember the name of that chemical that's found, but the church has not come out and said this is specifically why. We only know that we're supposed to abstain from them. So maybe we'll find out later on. Maybe there's a retest later on where we'll find out what those things are. But we do know, based upon things of the past that were thought to be good and they were turned out to be bad, we do know that the rest of those things in the word of wisdom probably then are also reliable. Or I don't know if that's a like that statement of just how you can test it now, let's test it a little bit further down the road, and maybe we'll see that the results are the same for why the word of wisdom is true.
That was really cool. I like that.
I like all the gospel things, but when Tammy asked about it, I was looking down because I had opened my book up to non-random sampling and stuff, and I was immediately thinking, well, how did the Lord pick his prophets, and, you know, where they would be and stuff? And so I just looked down, and there's purposive sampling and stuff. So, you know, he just kind of, I'm reading the definition, and it's like the Lord just went, okay, those people look like they could be okay to receive the gospel now, and that guy looks like a good prophet. And he probably did not do it like that at all, but it's fun to think about for me anyway.
You know? No, definitely. It's a good thought.
You know, I think we do use, you know, it's interesting with the inner rater reliability. I think we use the testimonies of other people and kind of compare them as we build our own testimonies. I think that a lot of these principles, the more we think about it, we can kind of see where they do fit into the gospel. You know, I like that whole idea that Liza just said. You know, it makes you think. You know, is this something random, or is this? I mean, I like that whole idea of it being purposeful, because then that kind of builds this idea that the Lord isn't leaving things to chance. But then he wants us to pray about things. He wants us to use a lot of the stuff that we're learning just in a very spiritual way to find out what's reliable and what's true or valid for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all have made some really great comments. It's like making me deep in thought.
Cool. Does anybody else have anything else they want to say? Any more questions about chapter 6? Or I mean about chapter 5?
I don't necessarily. I was just gonna say, like, the more we learn and the more knowledge we gain in this life, especially like in this class and all the intricacies and like how everything is just on this earth, like it just, I feel like is another testament, like that Heavenly Father exists. It's like none of this could just happen by chance and have no purpose
Yeah.
other than to live for this life period, you know. It's fascinating, I think.
Yeah. I
I think-
agree.
I think on the flip side, I can see how people can get lost in the ideas of science and think that these things can only happen by chance. It seems like as you read through all the impossibilities, and we were talking about the null hypothesis, and how you're not even trying to find out if it's true, you're just trying to disprove it. That's kind of where we are at now, where I feel like there are less people trying to find out whether or not God is real. They're just trying to find ways to prove that he isn't. And the more you look for the ways that he isn't, it's like there's just a ready supply of worldly views out there that support it. But the more we do look to see if he is there and he's real, we can see them. But the Lord doesn't want us to just take anybody else's word for it. Even he wants us to test it for ourselves. He wants us to find that truth for ourselves.
Yeah, isn't faith like an experiment? Tammy, you always say, like, you can't prove it. So, like, you can't
Yeah.
prove that there's a God, right? Or we're not supposed to. But we test things out our whole life.
That's so
Yeah.
true. That's so
I
true.
like, so when I think Emily started the little discussion right here, but when she started talking about it, it reminded me of a little meme that I saw, and so I saved it on my phone. So I went and looked for it, and it says, if I'm wrong about God, then I've wasted my life. If you're wrong about God, then you've wasted your eternity.
Oh,
Wow.
that is
So
good.
it doesn't matter, just believe in God, right?
Yeah, exactly. Weigh the risks and benefits, right? And that's a huge risk.
Mm-hmm.
You're betting your
Yeah.
eternal outcome.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's very thought-provoking.
And I've even thought, like, if he's not real or something, like, really you haven't wasted your life because you've been a really good person,
Yeah.
So in the end, you don't lose. So
Yeah.
when you're on the Lord's side, you don't lose. Funny how that works.
Right. Exactly.
We had a talk in Sacrament recently, and the gal was talking about kind of the ways of the world, and she said that the world would be just a much better place if everybody obeyed the commandments. She didn't even say, it wasn't if everybody followed the gospel. It was just the 10 commandments. If everybody just followed that, the world would be a much better place. Oh, she might have been talking a little politics there.
Yeah.
If our people going out for president would just follow
Yeah.
the 10 commandments, we would be in a much better place.
And it would be
Yeah.
much easier to vote.
It would.
Okay. Well, I think I've got our summary going.
Awesome.
I just listed everything that we talked about, the null hypothesis, talked about the true and proof. Anyway, we talked about the definitions of that. Let's see. Talked about reliability and validity. Talked about the outlines a little bit more, and then I listed the things that we talked about pertaining to the gospel. So, does anybody
Awesome.
else need to add anything else, like any concerns or questions?
I think we've gone over it really well.
Okay.
I'll stop the broadcast